The Subcommittee on Higher Education and Workforce Development will come to order. I note that a quorum is present. Without objections, the chair is recognized to call a recess at any time. The committee has gathered today to discuss the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision in Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard and the Students for Fair Admission versus University of North Carolina to explore the future possibilities of college admissions without racial discrimination. The court in a 6-2 decision held that race-based admissions are a violation of the Constitution and a violation of the Civil Rights Act. For too long, the gatekeepers of post-secondary education have treated applicants differently based on the color of their skin. For far too long, within the walls of our educational institutions, generations of Americans have been taught to accept the theory of eugenics as normal. This theory assumes that as a race, Black Americans think with their skin, that based on their skin color, they are monolithic in their politics, reasoning, and most importantly, their intellectual potential. Those who do not fit within certain expectations and boundaries are considered traitors to their race. The theory of eugenics has a prescribed baseline of expectations. This baseline accepts as a fact that the white race is inherently and intellectually superior, privileged, and destined to dominate other races. It also views the Black race as inherently hopeless, hapless, and forever broken due to slavery 200 years ago. Not taught in our educational institutions is our proud history as national leaders in our love of faith, family, the free market, education, and our country. Americans are always shocked to hear that the Black community once led our country in categories of success that all communities sought after. During the 40s to 60s, Black men led our nation in percentage matriculated from college, commitment to marriage, and percentage of entrepreneurs over 40%. We had a thriving community of which between 50 to 60% were middle class. Today's history is purposely silent on this community's commitment to hard work, grit, tenacity, resilience, intelligence, loyalty, and leadership. Instead, our story has been transformed into that of a weak race, hopelessly oppressed, and not to be respected but pitied. Through decades of demeaning messages, our country has accepted that Black Americans are overall incapable of competing against white Americans when it comes to intellectual merit. Affirmative action has been a subtle and stealth Trojan horse that has effectively messaged this racist attack of low intellectual expectations. Thankfully, the Supreme Court has recently granted us a major win for equal opportunity and for meritocracy, the two principles essential for the attainment of the American dream. Students across America, whether Black, white, Hispanic, Asian, or other, can now realize their potential without fear of overt racial discrimination or subtle bigotry. We're already seeing small changes due to race-blind, merit-based acceptance that are slowing the insidious pace of the radical left's agenda. For example, Columbia Law Review temporarily froze hiring because of the court's ruling disrupted their longstanding practices of selecting senior editors based on race versus merit. Columbia Law Review has since resumed hiring without unfairly discriminating, and hopefully more law schools will follow this example. As our nation celebrates the Supreme Court's ruling, we must remain diligent in identifying those who are defiant, those who, despite the Supreme Court's ruling, are determined to implement unconstitutional policies of affirmative action. There remain administrators who have expressed their intent to selectively ignore both the substance and the spirit of the Supreme Court ruling. Americans should never accept the subversive attempts to preserve race-based admissions, and I promise you, this congressional body will not. Chief Justice John Roberts was very clear when he wrote, and I quote, "Despite the dissent's assertions to the contrary, universities may not simply establish through application, essays, or other means the regime that we hold unlawful today. What cannot be done directly cannot be done indirectly. The Constitution deals with substance, not shadows, and the prohibition against racial discrimination is leveled at the thing, not the name. So let me repeat, and I quote, what cannot be done directly cannot be done indirectly." So those institutions who think the Supreme Court ruling is a pretty please ask, this committee will keep a close eye on the 2024 application process as it unfolds. Racism, hidden or overt, will not be tolerated by this oversight body. Today's admission process must not resemble yesterday's. Further, we will watch as the rulings disrupts the landscape of other race-based institutions across America, as they have been also put on notice. The Constitution is colorblind. Civil Rights Act is colorblind. In these tumultuous times, we should all be grateful that our democracy is steadfast, dedicated to treating everyone equally under the law, regardless of race, creed, color, or zip code. With that, I yield to the ranking member's opening statement. Ms. Scott.
Thank you, Chairman Owens, and thank our witnesses for your testimony today. Our nation still has a compelling interest in fostering racially diverse campuses, and the Supreme Court ruling and the Harvard UNC cases does not change that. In fact, it was the Supreme Court in 1978 in the Bakke decision that established that institutions could pursue a diverse student body to advance academic freedom and consider race as one of many factors to evaluate prospective candidates. And while the consideration of race as one of many factors in admissions is vital, it's important that we put the conversation in appropriate context. Of approximately 4,200 degree-granting institutions in the United States, less than 100 selective schools consider race as a factor in admissions, and only 10 consider race as an important factor. Before the adoption of race-conscious admissions policies at the University of Texas at Austin in 2005, black students never made up more than 4.5% of the freshman class. But following implementation of race-conscious admissions procedures, blacks, Hispanics, and Asian Americans enrollment increased, as did classroom diversity. Narrowly tailored race-conscious admissions practices actually level the playing field and counterbalance discriminatory admissions factors that are otherwise in play, such as standardized tests and legacy admissions. For example, the district court in the Harvard case illustrated how recruited athletes, legacy applicants whose families have a history of donating money to the school, and children of Harvard faculty make up a large percentage of each admitted class. In fact, while the applicants make up less than 5% of these applicants make up 5% of Harvard applicants every year, they constitute 30% of the applicants admitted each year, and nearly 70% of these applicants are white. Research also shows that standardized tests many institutions require for admissions have a discriminatory impact and, in fact, produce scores that correlate more with students' income, zip code, family wealth, socioeconomic background, and parents' educational attainment than the student's ability to succeed in college. To blindly allow the use of in admissions without further examining the discriminatory effect is, in fact, unacceptable. So when my colleagues across the aisle say they want a system based on merit, I agree. But the problem is the current system is not based solely on merit, and without policies to counterbalance the discriminatory factors, the outcome of the system will remain discriminatory. After the Supreme Court's ruling in June, the administration's responsibility to eliminate disparities in higher education and achieve diverse learning environments did not end. And I called on the Department of Education to issue comprehensive guidance to ensure schools and colleges fulfill their Title VI obligations and address existing discriminatory factors in college admissions now that the discriminatory factors are not counterbalanced by affirmative action. Now, one tool we could have is to achieve equal opportunity would be the Equity and Inclusion Enforcement Act, which has been pending in Congress for several years, and it would restore the private right of action for students and parents to bring disparate impact cases under Title VI. We also have pending the Strengthen Diversity Act, which Representative Jayapal and I reintroduced this Congress to provide resources to states or school districts that want to voluntarily develop plans to integrate their public schools. Finally, if we're serious about expanding access to higher education, then we must focus on ensuring that the system is available to all. That means instituting reforms such as those that we have proposed in the Loan Act, which will make going to college more affordable for both current and prospective college students. Justice Sotomayor said it best in her dissent: ignoring race will not equalize a society that is racially unequal. What was true in the 1860s and again in 1954 is true today. Equality requires acknowledgement of inequality. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Scott. Pursuant to Community Rule 8C, all members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m. 14 days after the hearing, which is October 4th, 2023. And without objections, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other material reference during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. I'll now turn to introduce our four witnesses, distinguished witnesses, and thank you again for being here. The first witness is Ms. Allison Soming, who is a legal fellow at the Pacific Legal Foundation located in Arlington, Virginia. Our next witness is Mike Zoe, who is president of the Asian American Coalition for Education in Orlando, Florida. Our third witness is Mr. David Inosoa, JD, who is the director of the Educational Opportunities Project and the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under the Law in Washington, D.C. And our final witness is Mr. Delano Squires, who is a research fellow at the Richard and Helen DeVos Center for Life, Religion, and Family at the Heritage Foundation, which is located in Washington, D.C., and who is testifying on his own behalf. We thank the witness for being here today and looking forward to your testimony. Pursuant to community rules, I'd like to ask each to limit your oral presentation to a 5-minute summary of your written statement. I'd also like to remind the witnesses to be aware of your responsibilities to provide accurate information to the subcommittee. I would first like to recognize Ms. Sumin. Is that on?
Now?
There we go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Chair Owens, Ranking Member Scott, distinguished members of Congress, thank you for the opportunity to present testimony on behalf of the Pacific Legal Foundation. We're a nonprofit legal organization that defends Americans' liberties when threatened by government overreach and abuse. I want to make 3 main points today. The Students for Fair Admissions decisions were important because they uphold the vital principle that individuals should be treated as individuals and not on the basis of their race. 2, follow-up litigation is necessary to realize the promise of these decisions. 3, the Education Department's guidance is a missed opportunity to inform schools of their important obligations in this area. Under the Constitution and Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, government and recipients of government money may not discriminate based on race. Before Students for Fair Admissions, there was a limited exception for universities to achieve a compelling interest in student body diversity. But universities largely slipped the leash of the Supreme Court's opinions and used race very broadly. The Students for Fair Admissions plaintiffs challenged this exception, bringing one case against Harvard University and a second against the University of North Carolina. The court held that these universities had not met their burden. As the Chief Justice wrote, each student must be treated as an individual, not on the basis of her race. Many universities have for far too long done just the opposite. And in doing so, they have concluded wrongly that the touchstone of an individual's identity is not challenges bested, skills built, lessons learned, but the color of their skin. Our constitutional history does not tolerate that choice. That's not likely to be the end of race preferences in admissions. Chief Justice Roberts anticipated schools would use proxy discrimination to evade the opinion's core prohibitions. The majority acknowledges that universities may consider admissions essays about how a student's race affects her life. But it also firmly states that universities may not simply establish through essays the regime held unlawful in the case, and further quotes an earlier Supreme Court opinion. What cannot be done directly cannot be done indirectly. Unfortunately, the early evidence suggests evasion is going to be rampant. We see statements of intention to defy the ruling from the deans of major law schools, from presidents of universities, and even statements of state governors telling universities in their state that they can safely ignore the decision. If these evasions go unchecked, Students for Fair Admissions guarantees of equal treatment will ring hollow. At the Pacific Legal Foundation, we've been fighting back against proxy discrimination at the K-12 level. Several other attorneys from There and I represent the Coalition for TJ, a group of parents challenging a re-engineered proxy discrimination admission scheme at Top Science and Magnet Technology School, Thomas Jefferson High School in Fairfax County, Virginia. In the summer of 2020, Fairfax County restructured its admissions process to in effect lower the numbers of Asian American students that could attend TJ. The text messages and emails produced in discovery make it clear that admissions was restructured because of, not in spite of, these effects on the numbers of Asian American students there. Yes, Fairfax County's discrimination was of the proxy kind, not the direct kind. But it's no less pernicious and certainly no less hurtful to the kids told that they couldn't go to their dream high school because of their race. Right now, that case is pending before the Supreme Court on a petition for certiorari. My PLF colleagues also have 3 other cases pending in the pipeline in the federal appellate courts involving proxy discrimination at high schools in Boston, New York City, Montgomery County, Maryland, that all follow the same general pattern. While litigation by nonprofit groups is an important way to enforce the core promise of Students for Fair Admissions, it's not the only way. The Department of Education has an important role to play in making sure that the civil rights laws are followed. Unfortunately, the frequently asked questions document that the Office for Civil Rights issued following the Students for Fair Admissions decision indicates they're not going to do that. It basically ignores the large and looming problem of proxy discrimination and essentially tells universities that whatever they want to do is fine as long as they're not too open about it. That's not right, that's not the law, and these universities need to be held to account to realize the core American promise that individuals should be treated as individuals and not on the basis of their race. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Mrs. Zoe. Mrs. Zoe.
Yeah. Chairman Owens and distinguished member of Congress, I'm Yikong Mike Zhao, a survivor of Chinese Cultural Revolution, during which my family endured political persecution, devastating personal loss, and extreme poverty. In 1992, I came to America as a poor foreign student. In this land of opportunity, I achieved my American dream, later becoming the Director of Global Planning at Siemens Energy. Through affirmative action, as shown in Appendix A of my testimony, colleges use higher admission standards, de facto racial quotas, and racial stereotypes to discriminate against Asian American applicants. This discrimination unjustly created unbearable study loads, stress, and psychological harm to our children. Many Asian American applicants even hid their racial identity when applying to colleges. In 2014, I and other co-founders of Asian American Coalition for Education, AACE, started our journey galvanizing Asian community to support Students for Fair Admissions for its lawsuit against Harvard and UNC. AACE and partner organizations filed civil rights complaints against Harvard, Yale, and other colleges. We organized rallies, encouraged students to join the lawsuits, and filed 5 amicus briefs in support. Today, our alliance has grown into over 300 organizations nationwide. This June, the Supreme Court rightly struck down race-based affirmative action. This is a historic victory for Asian Americans, as our children should no longer be treated as second-class citizens in college admission. This is also a historic victory for all Americans, as the ruling will help restore meritocracy, the bedrock of the American dream. It will also advance America towards a colorblind society, as Martin Luther King dreamed of 60 years ago. However, advocates of diversity, equity, and inclusion have not given up. On August 14th, Department of Education and Justice issued guidance that advocates continue use of race and race proxies in outreach and other programs. This guidance again misses the point. The root cause of racial disparity in college enrollment is the failure of the K-12 education, particularly in inner cities, to prepare Black and Hispanic children for colleges. Improving K-12 education is a better and a constitutional way to enhance racial diversity in higher education. Further, while America is faced with a STEM talent shortage and all K-12 education is behind other industrial nations, the Biden administration irresponsibly suggests colleges should further eliminate objective and rigorous admission standards. In response, AAC issued a policy statement attached as Appendix B, where we urge American colleges to stop the use of race and race proxies in college admissions. adopt a blind rating system by hiding students' name and other information that would disclose race, make students' race data inaccessible to admissions evaluators, base admissions criteria on the needs of educational program, not racial diversity or equity, restore standardized testing as major criterion in admissions. The troubling fact is today nearly 81% of all colleges have made standardized testing optional. In China, I witnessed that during Cultural Revolution, Chairman Mao abolished the national college entrance exam in order to achieve class equity. After destroying the meritocracy, Chinese colleges produced millions of revolutionaries who could not conduct research or managing enterprise. As a result, China's innovation stopped and its economy collapsed. America cannot afford to repeat this mistake by destroying meritocracy in the name of racial equity. When our nation is faced with unprecedented competition from international rivals, it's imperative to restore meritocracy in our educational institutions in order to maintain America's technological leadership and economic prosperity. The Supreme Court's landmark ruling provides historic opportunity for American colleges to correct their mistakes by promoting equality and meritocracy. I hereby call upon federal, state, and local governments to support our policy recommendations to do just that. Thank you.